Today evening, friends, our guest is Abhijit Iyer-Mitra, Senior Fellow at Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies. He is also the son of Tamil Nadu's first collector and close associate of Dr. Swami, Srimati V.S. Chandralekha, who I greatly admire. She was the president of the Tamil Nadu state unit of the Janata Party, which merged into Bharatiya Janata Party on 11th August 2013. Abhijit Iyer-Mitra specializes in defense economics and has been a visiting fellow at Sandia National Lab and the Stimson Center and regularly publishes on defense and foreign policy. He's also an outspoken panelist on most TV channels, and he has very varied interests. I even see him talking about food and cuisine and so many other things. Welcome, Abhijit.
Thank you so much for having me on, Meeraji.
Yeah. So, shall we start taking the questions? Can I question you?
Yep.
Okay. Our first question is, now that China has become a threat for us, and Russia is dependent on China and may have to even play as a slave, can we depend on Russia for arms? Will the $400 missile system become a white elephant?
Look, Russia is becoming increasingly more hostile in one sense of the word, more impotent in another sense of the word, and yet also surprisingly more relevant on India, more dependent on India in one sense of the word. And I'll explain this how. If you look at RT, Russia TV, which, is in America, they consider a propaganda agent, and it is. I think after Al Jazeera, they have the most anti-India content you can see of any television station. And mind you, this is the Russian government's official propaganda arm, in a sense. What the BBC is to the UK, RT is to Russia, and RT is much more controlled than BBC is. BBC has become a sort of woke madhouse. RT, is not. And they keep pieces attacking India. It is never the Indian point of view. If you remember when Shehla Rashid did all that JNU nonsense, the only channels to interview her properly, as in do sit-down focus features on her, were RT and Al Jazeera. Right. So, and there's a whole load of other content also that's very anti-India on RT. So this is number one. This is the hostility part. You see it in lots of other things. There's a whole cabal of, we believe, compromise to Pakistan or beholden to Pakistan through business deal ministers in the Kremlin. I'm not going to name them, but I think anybody who's a Russia watcher knows them. There's about 4 of them right now. Sometimes it goes up to 6. Who are, constantly undermining India there. That is the open hostility. The second is the impotence. Now, Russia does not have an official, mutual defense pact with India. We don't have that with the Russians. But they do have one with Armenia. And today, Armenia is being attacked. Armenians are being killed. Armenia proper, forget Nagorno-Karabakh, Armenia proper is under attack. And what are the Russians doing? Absolutely nothing. They're trying to call up the Turks, call up the Azerbaijanis and talk on the phone. And if their idea of a mutual defense pact is talking on the phone to your enemies, trying to sort out this thing, then, I think it's and we're not even talking about serious countries out here. I mean, Azerbaijan is a kind of okay-ish military power. Turkey's military power is severely eroded, but it is NATO. But, there are things that Russia could have done which would have prevented any kind of Turkish or Azeri attacks, which is you don't even have to attack Azerbaijan or Turkey. What you do is you station Russian troops and Russian aircraft in Armenian air bases. And, that becomes an automatic, the Turks and the Azeris can't take a chance then of shelling you or bombing you, because the moment you kill Russian troops, that's it. And, it also bypasses NATO's protection that Turkey has, because NATO is only protected if some other country attacks Turkey. If Turkey attacks another country, those NATO protections are no longer valid. The Russians won't even do that. So that comes to impotence. The third is how they are dependent on India. They realize that they are falling into, because the West isn't buying Russian products anymore. There's this sort of, not a boycott, but I guess a great suspicion of all things Russian. So they're not buying Russian things anymore. China is the only one buying from Russia properly. And they are very, very scared of falling into a Chinese monopsony. And for our viewers who don't know, a monopoly is when the seller is one. A monopsony is when you've only got one buyer. And India is the only other country that sort of breaks, that has the capability to break that monopsony, uh, which is defense equipment. We know that defense equipment is junk mostly, unless it is used the way the Russians use it. That is to say, a fully networked environment where everything talks to everything else and where all the pieces of equipment are Russian, in which case it works pretty well. It does not work that well when you mix and match it with other things. But we're still buying all of this. And they are kind of, you know, more dependent on us today than they probably ever were during the Cold War or before that to break their isolation. So that's three aspects of it. But can Russia be trusted? I'd say the single word answer is no, no, absolutely no.
Okay. Shall we go to the next one?
Yep.
With regards to the Sushant Singh case, Abhijit, it has revealed a deep division between people who believe he has been tortured and murdered and those who don't want the truth to come out. The arrogance of a dictatorial regime under three parties and their vendetta against the common man and media is very obvious. Abhijit, see, how do you see it? You've been following the case. How do you see it? And there are you have the public on one side who are desperate to get, put a closure to it and find out who has been responsible for this gruesome murder. So how do you see that, Abhijit?
So I don't know if he was murdered or not, because I have zero interest in Bollywood. The moment anything has a Gana or Nach in it, I just tune off immediately, because I really can't sit through another bloody Bollywood movie with this. It's the same storyline. It's just different actors, different locations, different plots. But it's boy falls in love with girl. Beech mein koi ye hota hai, tamasha hota hai, and in the end, either boy and girl get together or boy and girl die. Or it's some permutation combination of this. So Bollywood has been selling us the exact same story 200 to 300 times a year for the last 50, 60 years. I think it tells you a lot about the cultural decline of India, that where you have amazing stuff like, Amatya Rakshas or Mritchakatika, or, really wonderful plays, that you're reduced to telling the same story over and over again 200 times a year. More if you incorporate Tollywood and Gollywood, and I don't know what all the are. So you have to look, count me as a sort of disinterested, unconcerned external observer who's just getting a lot of fun watching all of this. So number one, I don't know if he was murdered or not. So I'm not going to talk about that. But what I am going to talk about is the way the government has been carrying out its persecution of everybody that's raised it. This is not how a government is meant to function. It's out. You can't just go on abusing the instruments of state power, going after people spreading rumors about a dead actor. If they're spreading rumors about a dead actor, it is the duty of the affected parties to file private defamation cases against these people. I am against criminal defamation, but I mean, it is an avenue open to all these people who are being named. So they should file criminal defamation or civic defamation or whatever against these people. They are not. It is not the state's job to get involved into mudslinging between private individuals. It is also not the job of the state to use its state apparatus to settle a criminal or civil defamation against either of the Thakres, because what they did wasn't in the discharge of their official duties. I don't think murder constitutes an official duty. So, you can't avail the protections of the state to do things like that. It may be complete rubbish, but you have every right to file a criminal defamation. You have every right to file a civil defamation. You do not have the right to misuse the powers of the state. The third thing, and the most worrying thing in all of this, is the persecution of Republic. And if you notice, the Editors Guild of India comes up with a long statement, 90% of which is hurling muck at Republic, and only 10% of which is criticizing the government for going after Republic. Number one. Second, the thing about the Editors Guild of India is the liberals don't know what to do with Seema Mustafa. She's basically Akar Patel's puppet. She is the one that they'd like to support, but then they can never forgive her for supporting MJ Akbar during the entire Me Too controversy, during which he lost his deputy foreign ministership or whatever. There is that fissure. The third issue here is, Kashmiris aren't part of the Editors Guild of India. They have a Kashmir Editors Guild because they refuse to accept that they are part of India, and therefore they do not join the Editors Guild of India. And the Editors Guild of India, after Seema Mustafa takes over, is much more interested in issuing statements condemning the government of Kashmir for an attack on somebody who is not its member, who expressly claims that Editors Guild has no jurisdiction there because they are not part of India, to protect a woman called Anuradha Bhasin, who is squatting on 6 government properties, rent-free, refuses to pay rent. Now, you tell me which person is going to let you squat on properties like that without seizing them and then locking up your property as surety till you pay said rent. वो रेंट भी नहीं देगी, स्क्वाट भी करेगी illegally, एक प्रॉपर्टी पे नहीं, 5 प्रॉपर्टी पे अलग अलग से, and you will issue things about that. So, it says a lot about the kind of used condom. And I'm sorry to use that word, but the Editors Guild of India has become a used condom. It isn't even worth a used condom can at least be recycled into something. The Editors Guild can't even be recycled into anything right now. That is what EGI has become. But everyone, what the Maharashtra government is doing to Republic and to certain people, you may be laughing now, but remember, tomorrow it will be turned against you. And for all of those of you sniggering today that about what is happening to Republic and these individuals, I pray to God it does get turned against you at some point.
But what I don't understand, Abhijit, is that, see, many a times, many of the channels have been proved as scamming, scamsters. And many of the journalists themselves are scamsters because they weave fake narratives and have been apologizing also for it. When a party like BJP is in power, why can't they be equally tough on these channels or paid media as what Uddhav is doing without any justification?
But Meena ji, who told you the BJP is in power? आपको किसने बोला बीजेपी सरकार चलाती है सेंटर? ये बीजेपी की सरकार नहीं है. It is an IAS government with outside support from the BJP. Okay, there is no BJP government in the center. We've got a certain person who dances to the IAS tune, and the IAS is smart enough to make him think that he is taking all the decisions. But the IAS is still very much a, the way it was formed, because I think, was it not Rasgotra, who was the man who was Indira Gandhi's secretary? I forget. Dhawan? Nahi, IAS wala tha. I forget. He came up with the whole idea of a committed bureaucracy, which is that the bureaucracy must be aligned with the thinking of the ruling party of India and the idea of India as defined by the ruling party. Right? Now, what the Congress would have you believe is what the BJP's version of history, and I think what most of us think is India's history, is that it is an unbroken 5,000-year continuum of culture and civilization. What the Congress wants you to believe, because it highlights their own rule, is that India has only existed for the last 100 to 150 years, and it is the gift of the Congress because the Mughal Empire created what was the rough contours of India, which the British then took over, and then the Congress fought them for it and took it over. Now, what the बीजेपी इतने उल्लू के पट्टे हैं. In Tamil we've got this saying vadigattana muttal. Vadigattana muttal means a distilled idiot. Like वो छन्नी से जब चाय को आप दूध को चाय से निकालते हो, वो वो इडियट का एसेंस है भारतीय जनता पार्टी. ठीक है ना? It's almost like making, since you run Gulf Connoisseur, you know this. It is like fine champagne brandy. It is XO cognac distilled from champagne. Okay. They don't even understand the basics of anthropology and sociology and why history is not about facts. History is about narratives. The way a country think is shaped by these narratives. You still have not changed the history books. You are in a majority. When are you going to change the history books? Even the basics of changing the mindset of the country haven't been done. Your recommended reading for the IAS is still the Hindu. You still haven't created a newspaper of record or a TV channel of record. Okay, you haven't changed anything in the educational syllabus, which basically forces you to be a sort of left pseudo-secular whatever to get into the services. Everybody knows the services interview is a joke. There was actually a foreign secretary who wrote that he was on an interviewing panel once, and he said that the interview consisted of asking this lady officer who was going to join the IFS, who is your favorite Malayalam composer? She gave a name, and then he asked her to sing one of his songs, and apparently she sang it beautifully, and this was the totality of the girl's interview, and she joined the IFS. ये घोचू गोरिल्ला के नाजायज औलाद इंटरव्यू चलाते हैं ऐसे, और एक मलयालम गाना गाने से तुम्हारा IFS का ये हो जाता है. And mediocrities, third rate mediocrities like Shah Faisal, who scored very mediocrely in the exams, then becomes IAS topper based on nonsense like this. This is the kind of unprofessional trash who run your country, who is trusted implicitly by your prime minister, who effectively run the government. The BJP is just the mukhota. वो गोविंदाचार्य जी एक बार बोलते थे ना कि कोई मुखौटा है. मोदी जी तो बस मुखौटा है, असली सरकार तो IAS का सरकार है.
And also,
so I don't.
This becomes, please.
Sorry, I'm done. Next.
Yeah. So, see, what is angering people is also the fact that, a lot of things are happening against Hindus and in Sanatana Dharma, which is, just being looked over by the present government. And in China, amazingly, mosques and their symbols are all being razed to the ground. And, this section of people are not opposing. It's only in India that they act very smart, and Hindus keep quiet, and the government also acts like, Dhritarashtra. They just don't bother at all. Why this way, Abhijit?
Because in India, we have never understood carrots and sticks in dealing with terrorism and mob violence. When the mob becomes violent, you incentivize it by arresting the people who the mob is protesting against, instead of dispersing the mob and saying you have absolutely no right. This is a very colonial approach to governance, because the colonial approach to governance is we are only here to extract money and resources from you. Therefore, because we're going to get out in about 150 years, we just want to minimize this thing. If it leads to more downstream violence later on, वो हमारा नहीं है, तब तक हम सब निकाल के चले गए होंगे. Okay, but when you are in unless the BJP wants us to believe that it is a colonial government, what you do is that when somebody protests, you double down on what they are protesting about. You protect the person that they are protesting against, because then they know that this kind of arm twisting does not work. But see, nobody has taught them the basic 101 of law enforcement or anything like that. You look at the abysmal way in which they handled the Delhi riots, it was just as clumsy and incompetent as the man's handling of the Godhra riots. Godhra was never a crime of commission. It was a crime of omission. It wasn't what they did. It was what they could not do. But that was at least legitimate because, Modi had asked for central troops from lots of different states. They all said no, no, no. So you had a paucity of troops. भाई तुम प्रधानमंत्री हो, अब सेंटर में बैठे हो, तब भी नीरो की तरह बैंड बजा रहे हो जब दिल्ली जल रहा है. ये कहां से होता है भाई? I mean, at some point, you've got to take responsibility for your actions. You can't think that speeches are a substitute for an action. You can have a great cadence in your speeches, but, mitron, bhaiyon, and people may go into a tizzy, but that isn't a substitute for action on the ground.
And
so I don't think the third part of this is the fact that they think sab log karyakarta hain. They should be honored to work for us. We don't owe them damn all. Okay? They never stand by their own. They don't know the basics of law and order. How do you apply a carrot? How do you apply a stick? In many ways, they do exactly what Mehbooba Mufti used to do. The jobs for first-time stone pelters, which basically meant that if you couldn't get a government job, you went and first-time stone pelted, then you'd get a government job. This was happened. Remember, this policy was announced in alliance with the BJP. The BJP was complicit in that decision. Never forget that. So you have this whole sort of... it's not that they're anti-Hindu. It's that they're clueless about government. They're clueless about power, except when it comes to self-interest. Narrow political self-interest of one or two of the leaders at the top maximum. Baki ka sab disposable commodity hai.
See, it was amazing. Today I saw a tweet by the health minister who says that, see, we shouldn't burst crackers on Diwali. And when he should be worrying about COVID, and also to penalize Dr. Sudhir Gupta, who actually tried to mess up in Sushant's case. He doesn't do those things. He's telling us that we should not burst crackers. As it is, the Hindus are very angry. Now, this is one more tweet that makes people even more angry.
And imagine this clown, he doesn't even know that 90% of the pollution that is coming in is because of the change of crop that happened, 25 years back in Punjab, where, they changed crops as part of the Water Conservation Act or something like that. And they burnt it at a time after the monsoons rather than pre-monsoons, when the monsoons used to settle the smoke and things like that. Firecrackers at best add, if your air quality is good, one day you can have firecrackers which will add at most 10%, 10 to 12% pollution maximum. The rest of it is all coming from your third-rate construction practices. That is one large chunk, because, here we do obsolete cement-based open construction, as opposed to any civilized country which by this time should have moved on to prefab construction, girder-based prefab construction, which we have not, which would have also improved the quality of life of the laborers and things like that. It would have actually made it a skilled job rather than the unskilled rubbish that it is right now. So you can also see the failure of your human resource policy, the failure of your urban development policy, all of it. It is very symptomatic. And imagine a minister sitting in the cabinet who does not know that it is crops and architecture leading to this, and an allegedly pro-Hindu, Hindu Sher, Hindu Awaz, saying don't burst firecrackers on Diwali. I mean, how much more proof do you need? It is not malice. It is genuine cluelessness. Vinashakale viprita buddhi.
Abhijit, there's been so much of proof that the opposition party has a hand. They work together with Pakistan on many issues. When they caught this terrorist yesterday, it's all proof that Pakistan, though it's in a state of chaos, it's working against India. And we have people within who are supporting them. Why can't we take a more stern hand on these people? Because they've been exposed so many times by experts, even in the 2611, every year. They've been proved to have a hand.
I don't think our police is up to the job. You look at the extraordinarily shoddy way in which the Delhi riots investigations have been handled. Going through what I've read about Omar Khalid being arrested, I'm not even seeing a basic prima facie case made out against him. For those Naxals who have been in, alleged Naxals who have been in jail for the last year, year and a half, who have still not been found guilty, by the way. Again, with one of them, I actually read the entire 1,000 page, I think it was more than 1,000 pages charge sheet. And I was going through and said, bhai, idhar to ek bhi charge nahi hai that can actually stick. If you've got such a third-rate police force that can't make a clear case, I'm telling you, they're all going to come out of jail. None of those charges are actually going to hold up. Hmm? And you've created this halo of a martyr around them as well. You're not going to go very far generally. But when it comes, so how are they going to dig up far more sophisticated evidence required in a foreign collusion case? That said, I don't think the Congress is actually colluding with the Pakistanis. Quite the contrary. I think the Congress is quite a patriotic party whose sense of patriotism has become extraordinarily misguided. And I'll tell you why it has become misguided for two reasons. One is that ever since Sonia Gandhi brought her, European leftist sensibilities here, because, nationalism is a very dirty word in Europe. In Africa, in Asia, in North and South America, nationalism is perfectly acceptable. But Europe, because of World War II and its history, it's a very, very dirty word. She's brought that entire mindset, and she's brought up her children in that mindset. So, it's transplanting a sort of European NGO mentality into India with a completely different reality. So this is number one. The second reason is that everybody has to follow the Clown Prince's lead. I can tell you, for example, there are a lot of Congress leaders in the CWC who think the boy is an idiot. Unfortunately, their progress is dependent on virtue signaling and saying, because they know this boy isn't going to lift the party out of the garbage dump. He's taken it down. The Congress today is where the CPIM were about 10, 15 years back.
Yeah.
So in another 10, 15 years, they fully expect the Congress also to become 3 seats, 5 seats, 6 seats wala party. Now, the problem with all of this is their personal interest does not lie in rocking the boat at the moment. So they're not opening their mouths about it. And the more and more the Congress starts taking on NGO positions, the more and more it is going to sound like Pakistan. And there's nothing you can do about it because Congress itself does not seem to realize how jarring it is and how the people have absolutely no tolerance for this kind of rubbish. It's bad for India, but it's the best thing that happened to the BJP. You don't know how many BJP leaders I've spoken to who keep saying, बॉस तुम राहुल गांधी को इतना गाली क्यों देते रहते हो? वो तो हमारे लिए बहुत अच्छा है, तुम उसको गाली देना बंद करो. Because they believe, you, like any good strategist believes, you never interrupt an enemy while the enemy is making a mistake. And the boy simply cannot self-correct because nobody tells him he's wrong. See, he's protected from all the criticism. Agar wo, if he trips and falls, it is highly likely that the courtiers in the Congress will say, "Sir, ये क्या master stroke करके दिखाया? सबके सामने आप थोड़ा सा हटके और गिरे to show that it is a metaphor for how a country can trip and fall." They'll do that, and he'll probably even believe that. Do you know how many people I know who probably should be being listened to by Rahul, who are treated absolutely like dirt by him? His idea of the world is these वो एक secretary था ना JNU से, that fellow from JNU, he used to actually chakkar katofy the BJP office because he wanted a BJP ka ticket. I'm not going to name names, but he's the secretary to Priyanka right now. Apparently she absorbed him. But he used to wait outside for hours on end outside the BJP office for a BJP ticket. Useless fellow, got into the Congress, and now he's the be-all and end-all for Rahul Gandhi. And now Priyanka Gandhi. So that tells you a lot.
Yeah. Also, another question that I wanted to ask you, Abhijit, is see, with the death of Nikita, the love jihad thing has come into the forefront, and they want to now make laws. I mean, this is something they should have done long time back because so many women have died under this influence. It's not a it's there's no love in it. It's only a strategy to convert women and then kill them, Hindus.
Mm, mm.
So, what do you think? Do you think the law is coming a little too late?
See, they'll pass a law. My issue has always been with the enforcement, given how compromised your police is. Because the police, there is not a single crime pie in town that the police doesn't have its fingers in, because you don't have any kind of quality control or checking of the police and things like that. So it's actually a criminal law and alleged law enforcement criminal nexus that operates. Sometimes the police actually does a job, and when it chooses to do a job, it can do it very well. The problem is it is so heavily compromised, you don't know when it is doing its job and when it is hand in glove with organized crime. Now, what happens with love jihad is, number one, you may pass a law, but see, the law isn't as simple as just passing the law. Remember, beef was always banned in this country, but it was never enforced till today, till 2014, when this government took over, when it actually decided to start enforcing that law. So तुम love jihad का law करोगे, but because the police is a state subject, I can tell you every state that isn't a BJP state is simply not going to enforce it. Even the BJP states क्या enforcement करेंगे? I mean, BJP states are the biggest joke around here. If you're a Hindu, you're probably safer in Kerala than you are in a BJP ruled state, because at least there some kind of public pressure will shame the government to act. Here they'll always say Modi is greatest, Modi is best, and then you can't say anything about the government after that. So I don't see how it is going to get operationalized. The third thing here is, how are you going to separate willing marriages, where you have a Hindu girl or a Hindu boy willingly, of sound mind, having an interreligious marriage, and accepting that he or she has to convert to Islam? Because the girl, uh, Muslims seldom to never accept. They're very happy to receive, but they're not happy to give away.
Yeah.
Okay, so it doesn't matter boy or girl, the conversion to Islam will have to happen. Number one. Number two is the fact, because most Muslim women spend their time sequestered in, a parda or burqa or whatever. The avenues of socialization between boy and girl are far less between Muslim girls and Muslim men than they are between Muslim men and Hindu boys. Muslim men and Hindu girls. So there's also the statistical thing that because more Hindu women can socialize with Muslim men, you are naturally open to greater cross-pollination. And that is a perfectly natural, voluntary thing, irrespective of the statistics, which you cannot criminalize. You cannot criminalize interreligious marriages, full stop. So how are you going to designate all of this? Because what you are talking about is brainwashing. Now, even with brainwashing, what do you mean by brainwashing? Tomorrow, can you say, मेरा बेटा कांग्रेस ज्वाइन कर दिया, उसको कांग्रेस ने ब्रेन वॉश किया? How are you going to prove brainwashing? Yaar? What is defined brainwashing? What is the legal definition of brainwashing? So you can't legislate brainwashing. The only thing you can legislate is A, false promises or misrepresentation of previous marital status, or the use of force, which is a very difficult bar to prove, the use of force at least. Okay? So I don't see, it's great that they're bringing in a law, but it will change nothing, because as long as you have a weak, compromised police with very low IQ and an inability to process the nuances of the law, and mind you, this is matched by the fact that we write laws कि उसको पहले argue, कोर्ट में argue करना छोड़ो, उसको समझने में ही एक PhD चाहिए हर एक लॉ के लिए. Thereof, thereto, therein, therefore, therefore, of, blah, blah, blah. You're like, what the hell, man?
Yeah.
So I don't see anything good coming off this. This is, people believe that you just have to do one thing to set something right. You don't. It is a system of systems you have to set right in order to combat any one thing.
There's a question from Lalit Spam says, can someone on the lines of Dowry Act be used for countering love jihad?
Sure, but give me what the language is. How are you going to counter? How are you going to determine what is brainwashing? Okay. How are you going to determine what is statistical imbalance? That more Hindu women are exposed to Muslim men than Muslim women are exposed to Muslim men. नहीं कर सकते हो ना? तो कहाँ से? Tell me what is the legal language? I haven't seen legal language anywhere in the world that is able to solve these kind of issues.
Yeah.
Okay. Third, if you make it about force or representation of misrepresentation of previous marital or misrepresentation of religion, how are you going to prove it with a compromised bureaucracy, with a compromised police force? Best of luck. It will be one more thing that you added to the one more law that you've added, which will bas naam ka law hoga, nothing more than that.
Abhijit, see, in these years, I mean, this is the second term of BJP in power, and not even one person. Yeah, please.
Meenaji, sorry, just one thing. Just to answer the question, very quickly a question popped up. Why doesn't the government listen to people like you? भाई अगर तुम 24/7 लोगों को बोलते रहोगे उनके मुंह पे कि भाई तू उल्लू का पट्टा है, तेरा बाप उल्लू का पट्टा है, तेरा पूरा गवर्नमेंट उल्लू का पट्टा है, तुम सुनोगे क्या? अगर मैं तेरे घर में आके बोलूं तू उल्लू का पट्टा है, तेरा बाप उल्लू का पट्टा है, तेरी माँ उल्लू का पट्टी है, तुम सुनोगे क्या? तुम मेरे को झापड़ मार के घर से निकालोगे ना? My role is not in government. My role is outside government, holding the mirror up to them, saying, "Tu ullu ka patta, tera baap ullu ka patta, teri maa ullu ki patti." That's it. Sorry. Now back to your question.
Yeah. The fact is, when you say this, the fact is that they don't take criticism well. Anybody who criticizes is no longer a part of their party. And and the second part is that, see, this is the second term that they are in power, and not one person, not one scamster has been put in jail. But this was not the election promises that they made. So somewhere people of India feel cheated.
Of course. See, the thing is, why is the criticism coming out? You are criticizing because they are not doing anything that they promised to do properly.
Yeah.
They claim right-wing party. I have seen communists who are more right-wing than the BJP is at the moment economically. You have an absolutely unconcerned, blind, pitilessly cruel environment for entrepreneurs, startups, the micro, medium, and small sector who are suffering very, very badly, who nobody is listening to, and instead they get defensive and give speeches. Now, if you are not going to get criticized, kya chumma deke bolenge? See, you don't want us to tell you what is going wrong. When we tell you what is going wrong, you're like, well, we don't want to hear you. You're our enemy. Anybody who says something, this thing about them becomes their enemy. Okay? And mind you, it isn't the BJP as a whole. It is a very small cabal of highly insecure, impotent people who are very good at advertising and self-projection and not so good at delivery, who are obviously have an inferiority complex, who get rattled by any kind of criticism.
Yeah.
Okay. And what can we do in that case? There's nothing much. I mean, even today, if it comes to a snap election, I'm going to vote for the BJP. Because every time I think, maybe I can vote for the Congress again, Rahul Gandhi just opens his mouth and I'm like, no, 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 no. Thank you very much. I was like, in the last election, 2019, my constituency is Mylapore. I was Madras. So I was kind of desperately, like, maybe I should vote for the Congress. Maybe I should vote for the Congress. And every time, well, it was the DMK there, I think. So every time my finger would go there, I'd be like, I just can't do this. This feels like treason. It feels like being a complete anti-national. I will feel dirty. I can't even live with myself. And so I just held my nose and pressed thak for where it was the ADM. So because it was the ADMK, I didn't have so much of a problem because the groups are quite okay. Huh? So I don't exactly have a problem with them, except it's a national election. See, so even though you're voting for ADMK, which is the two, this is the sign for the ADMK, the two leaves.
Yeah.
I end up seeing the Kamal out there, and it was a very trying moment for me, So,
Yeah.
what do you do? Even the pro-Hindu party is so callous, and I wouldn't say they're anti-Hindu. They just don't give a shit about Hindus. They don't give a shit about Hinduism, and they're incompetent to boot. So what do you do? It's there's this saying. I'm going to translate it into Hindi because people won't understand Tamil. It's on being asked that who is your proudest, which one of your sons are you proudest about? The father turns to the monkey burning the roof of his own house and says, see, it is the one burning the roof of my own house. Because तुम्हारे सब औलाद इतने नालायक हैं that only the one layak enough to burn down your own house like a bandar is the one you're proudest about. And that, unfortunately, is the BJP for us, whether we like it or not. What are the options?
Coming to the US elections, it's Trump versus Biden. What are your thoughts on this, Abhijit? On which side would it lean? And if, for example, Trump were to lose, what would it be like for the USA?
Okay. So I'm going to split this into three parts. One is what I want to happen. Two is what I think will happen. And three is what India should do if the worst eventuates. Yeah. So number one is that I personally think Trump is going to win. What I think is going to happen is it's going to be a very, very close fight that will probably end up in the courts, possibly, because what we're seeing is there's a Trump voter who is very, very scared of voicing the fact that they are Trump voters. None of the polling agencies account or wait for the fact that Trump voters are either too intimidated or too shy to accept that they're going to vote for Trump. The polls that account, only one, I think the Trafalgar Group is the only one that factors in this voter shyness of Trump voters. They are actually showing a Trump sweep happening all over again. So, an electoral college sweep. I don't know if it's going to translate into a popular vote sweep, but it'll almost certainly be an electoral college sweep. Number one. Number two, what you'll see is obviously there's a massive reawakening of the Democratic voter base. In 2014, a lot of people hated Hillary so much. A lot of Democrats hated Hillary so much. They just did not come out to vote. There was that. The second part was because all the polls were saying Hillary's already won 90%, 95%, 96% assured victory. There was also complacency that they did not come out to vote saying, I don't need to vote. She's won it. It's in the bag. How this is going to play out now, we don't know. But let's be clear. No, in the last almost 100, no, maybe at least 70 years, no sitting president has lost the second term election unless they were confronted by a giant. So if you look at Herbert Hoover, he lost his second term, one, because of the Great Depression, and two, because he was confronted by Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The second president to lose their second term was Jimmy Carter, who was confronted by Ronald Reagan, who was another giant, like, eternal presidents. Nobody remembers Herbert Hoover, but everybody remembers Ronald Reagan. Reaganism is a thing, like Thatcherism is a thing. And the third president to lose it was George Bush Sr., who lost it to Bill Clinton, who's, again, I mean, whether you like him or not, the fact is, he was one of those rock star presidents. So they've always won re-election. Now, the thing is, from which angle is Biden a rock star? बुढ़ा का या तो अल्जाइमर्स है या तो डिमेंशिया है, पता नहीं कुछ तो है उसका, या तो अर्ली स्टेज अल्जाइमर्स है या तो अर्ली स्टेज डिमेंशिया है. असली presidential candidate is Kamala Harris. Everybody knows this. And Kamala Harris, nobody likes. Her negatives aren't as bad as Hillary, but they're not very good either. Right? And they're also protecting her from the campaigning circuit, because if you notice, for a long time, Kamala wasn't being projected at all, because they knew the more she opened her mouth, like Pappu who turns away. Every time Pappu speech, 15,000 people never return to the Congress ever again. Okay, all it takes for me to change my vote from Congress back to BJP is one Pappu speech. Not even a Pappu speech. He just has to put out a tweet, and I'm like, "Chalo, Congress ko chodo, BJP ko." So, Kamala she's not as bad as Hillary, but she's not very good either. So, I personally feel Trump is going to carry the day. Now, what happens if, nightmare scenario, that Biden and Kamala become president? One is, we know Biden is completely compromised to China. So Trump's tough line on China, that is the end of it. They will make tamasha noises saying, Obama had the pivot to Asia. And everybody went gaga over the pivot, even though he did nothing. Okay. He was still totally focused on Europe. It all became, it was only under Trump that it became about China. Till then, it was all Eurocentric. And when people say that Trump can't work with allies, the only people saying that Trump can't work with allies are the Europeans. If you look at Israel, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Oman, and all these countries, they're openly plumping for Trump. Because they've never had an American president who's worked with them in the way Trump has. Japan, Korea, they love Trump. The leadership loves Trump. Australia, the leadership loves Trump. They have no issue with it, because they feel he's the only president who's actually taken on China properly. Right? As opposed to Obama, who pulled the rug from under the Japanese. Do you remember that during the island dispute, he said, we will only protect Japan if it is attacked, implying that the Senkaku Islands were not Japan. So, Obama actually undermined Japan's territorial claims that way. So there was a whole, this thing about it. So you will have essentially what is a Chinese Manchurian candidate as the president of America. You will have a vice president who will have to virtue signal and posture for her radical jihadist electorate, because the radical jihadist electorate is very, very important in terms of swinging the vote for the Democrats. And because she has, even though she never admits being a Hindu, she's not a Hindu, she's not a practicing Hindu, she just has, by some great misfortune of nature, a tainted drop of Hindu blood somewhere there. She will have to overly virtue signal that she is not pro-India or pro-Hindu or anything like that. It is going to be a madhouse between a China conflict of interest and a virulently jihadophile, Hindu-phobe woman, Banshee, who will be celebrated in India for no other virtue than there was an act of nature of mitosis and meiosis that happened 50, 60 years back. I don't know how old is she? 90 years old? 108? Well, whatever. जब भी वो mitosis meiosis हुआ था, when one sperm got lucky and entered the ova, pure accident of nature. We are meant to be proud about a pure accident of nature that happened 108 years back.
CVS Prakash says US GDP growth of 33% is positive for Trump.
I don't think it's 33%, but yes, American economy has started growing again. And everybody is predicting a huge stock market crash if Trump loses. So that tells you where market sentiment is. But remember, because a lot of these markets are based in the East and West Coast, where there is a coercive environment. If you say anything pro-Trump, you can actually lose your job. Okay, you can be accused of all kinds of things and lose your job in the east and west coast. That coercive, oppressive, almost military dictatorship kind of environment where you're forced to vote for their leader is very, very prominent. And because these businesses have to virtue signal, they will probably end up the east coast and west coast, they will almost certainly vote for Biden. Okay, I'm telling you right now, on the west coast, Washington state, Oregon, California, decisively for Biden. On the east coast, Florida and Texas will probably end up voting for Trump. But everything, I'd say the real thing you've got to look at is the Mason-Dixie line, that separated the North and the South during the Civil War. I think everything north of that, Virginia, North Carolina is a bit of a swing. I think this time Trump is going to carry North Carolina, but north of North Carolina, so Virginia, Maryland, right up to Massachusetts, Connecticut, are all going to vote for Biden. Is it going to be enough? I don't think so. I think Trump is going to carry it, but let's see. I mean, we don't know how the Democrats' attempts at ballot stuffing and electoral fraud are going. We don't know how they are manipulating the postal ballot and things like that, which, because of COVID is much more important at the moment. Let's see.
There's a question from Lalit Spam. Do you think China is seriously considering taking over Taiwan? If so, wouldn't there be a military response from West, given importance of companies like TSMC?
Yeah, look, I don't think China is actually considering it. They keep threatening it, but they know it'll be extremely expensive in treasure and life to them. The Taiwanese aren't spring chickens. And the thing is that as long as Trump is there, there's going to be 100% support for Taiwan. Okay. You remember even when they were doing all that South China Sea, when Galwan happened, when our 20 troops got killed, China was also doing very minor stuff in the South China Sea. And Trump sent two aircraft carrier groups. So that is 2 aircraft carriers, about 200 combat aircraft, 8 or 9 destroyers, 4 or 5 submarines. It's a whole fleet. 2 of their aircraft carriers can sink the entire Chinese Navy in hours.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter the tonnage of the Chinese Navy, the size of the Chinese Navy, they will literally sink it in hours. Okay. Remember in 1979 or 81 or 82, I forget now, the Americans took exactly 3.5 hours to sink the entire imperial, what had become the Islamic Iranian Navy at that point in time. Okay. With China, given the technology gap, it's not going to be that much tougher. So, इसमें कुछ नहीं होने वाला है. Next, what is your take of Khushbu?
Yeah.
Anita Christabel Khushbu in Tamil Nadu politics. Look, Khushbu is my neighbor. As in my mom's house, she lives exactly opposite my mom's house.
You have security.
And she has been my favorite Tamil. I don't watch Tamil movies that much, but like the one I've seen, I've always loved Khushbu's career and Khushbu's acting. And I think she's got a well above average brain to analyze things. Okay. So I quite like her. So I really have nothing negative to say in that story, except, I judge people by their actions. When they're in government, not by tweets or by this thing. So I really can't comment till somebody is given responsibility and how they discharge those responsibilities. That is what I judge them based on. Bihar election prediction, no idea. I haven't heard anything. I have not read a convincing argument from anyone as yet. So I'm not... Boss, sorry, this isn't a astrology show, Baba. Don't ask me next Bihar election, next TN election. Bihar at least is okay. But TN election, how am I meant to know? My guess is OPS, CPS won't do too badly, because they haven't done such a bad job. And for some reason, Stalin has, Kalaignar, Karunanidhi, he had toned down his anti-Hinduism a lot. He wasn't anti-Hindu towards the end. His last 2 elections, there was no anti-Hindu slogans or whatever. Stalin, unfortunately, hasn't learned that lesson. He's vitriolically anti-Hindu, publicly anti-Hindu. He hires all these, LTT porkies There was one Purki who just got kicked out of News 18, CNN, IBN, who's now been hired as the chief of what's it called? Of Surya TV? No, Sun TV. Sun
Sun
TV.
TV.
That's it.
Mm,
Sun TV.
mm,
So I'm not seeing anger against EPS OPS. Uh, let's see. I mean, we could be wrong. I personally think the ADMK is going to lose, but it's going to be like Jayalalitha's last loss. Normally, what happens is the person who lose only ends up with 10, 15 seats, and the other party ends up with almost 300 seats. As opposed to Jayalalitha's last loss, which was, she still had 90, 80, 90 seats, which was a very respectable loss. It wasn't a bad loss in any sense of the word. And then she won 2 successive elections. She bucked that whole trend of pendulumic politics. I think to a large extent we might see that happen, but I may be wrong because it's too far away. These trends start becoming much clearer when you're closer to the election, or like in the case of Bihar right now, there is no trend that is visible, which is what worries me the most. I don't like it when trends aren't visible.
Yeah.
Next.
What do you think about Yogi Ji's style of functioning?
Mixed. I think on one hand he's quite effective in certain areas, like especially in economics, suspending labor laws and things like that for 3 years for businesses to come. He's been very pro LGBTQ because that Noida train station has been staffed by trans persons and has been named Pride Station to honor the trans community and things like that. He set up the trans university for people to for transgender people to lead a life of dignity and gain education and so on and so forth. I think he takes a fairly tough line on security. On the other hand, it's still not 100%. Right? There's a lot of infighting within his police itself. There is certainly a lot of pro-Thakur politics happening out there, with good reason, because the Brahmins were in alliance with Mayavati. So he sees them as kind of traitors in that sense that, when the Thakurs were standing up for Hindutva, what the hell were the Brahmins of UP doing? So, which is fine, but it's still a fairly casteist political structure out there, which we saw the results with the Hathras rape case. Completely bungled, mishandled, very, very badly. And even if there was nothing wrong per se, the management of the whole issue left a very, very bitter taste in people's mouth. It was inept, it was incompetent, and there's this famous old saying, Napoleon's foreign minister, if you could call him that, Talleyrand, used to say, it was worse than a crime, it was a blunder. There are lots of blunders out there, which and he's got this tendency to micromanage things, centralize, which again we've seen with another person in the center, which never yields good results. A state is easier to manage, center is much tougher. So next.
A question by Prasoon Chatterjee. Please comment on the recent developments on Gilgit-Baltistan and when are we taking it back and how?
Look, it's a paper change what Pakistan has done, and we are not taking it back. Not in my lifetime, not in your lifetime. I don't know if you're older than me or younger than me, but it is not in either of our lifetime. Okay? Jo gaya, wo gaya. It is a historical trend. If you look at greater India in that sense, the Indic collective, at one point the entire Buddhist whole was also part of the Indic collective, but if you Indic greater area, the arc of influence in that sense, the arc of civilization, and before Buddhism, Hinduism, you have traces of it in Azerbaijan, you have traces of it in Turkey, you have traces of it, a lot of traces of it in Central Asia, in Southeast Asia, especially Angkor and things like that. In Buddhism, it grew to even greater heights, even though Eastern Buddhism, Chinese and Japanese Buddhism mutated completely. So it was never part of that Indic thing, though it was, if you actually look at the Tang dynasty, there's a beautiful book about it. I think Sardar K.M. Panikar wrote it. I'm not too sure. I think he wrote it. Uh, it was about how China had become completely Indianized at some point during the Tang dynasty. But anyway, I mean, leave that aside. What we call India has been reducing in size. Gilgit Baltistan तुम्हारे हाथ से गया. Best of luck to you. I can't see any circumstances under which it comes back to India. Especially not with nuclear deterrence in play between India and Pakistan. Forget any territorial changes. Full stop.
The economic impact of COVID-19, I think not only Europe, on the rest of the world. Saurabh Devnath.
I think what you're going to see now is it was very curious because, for me, the greatest economic impact of COVID was going to be two things. One was because of resource competition, because of the economic devastation. The resource competition means that countries are going to become harder and harder on immigration. They were politically trying to hide up all the havoc that illegal immigration causes, which because of COVID, they are no longer able to hide anymore. Because they need jobs for their own people. They can't afford to start giving jobs or refuge to immigrants anymore. Of course, it doesn't help that most of these immigrants were coming from conflicts that Europe itself had created, Libya, Syria, and things like that. The second was that because they blamed China for it, there was going to be a movement towards 3D printing, in which case it was going to be low-level production because 3D printing has to slowly increase in sophistication. So it is basically low-value addition production that gets replaced first, like toothbrushes and bulbs and things like that. And slowly it moves on to medium and then high-end production. Now, the thing is, the move to 3D printing was going to affect India the most because remember, China is far ahead of us in production. Surprisingly, what I've found is that blaming China for it has taken a backseat. Till about 3 months back, they were all very emphatic about China. Today, nobody's talking about China, which is also something I'd anticipated, that Chinese money would buy the conversation. It would divert the conversation away from an economic boycott, not necessarily even an economic boycott, but self-reliance. Because the way China manipulated the mask market and was selling all kinds of defective masks, defective oxygen meters and things like that, and all of that. And that has happened. Nobody's talking about China anymore. So in that sense, it's a mixed bag.
Everybody's curious to know about what you think about Arnab Goswami and the kind of torment he's facing and the way he's facing it.
It is torment. There's nothing else to be said about it. And he's a very, very dear friend of mine. Wonderful human being as well. So let me say this. Number one, he came to when Rajdeep moved from CNN IBN to India Today. India Today's viewership numbers did not increase significantly at all. In fact, they hardly increased. There was no increase. Even though he was the second most watched TV anchor in India after Arnab Goswami, he did not take his viewership with him to India Today. But when Arnab started Republic, Times Now's viewership did not go down. He created another 30 to 40% viewership overnight that watched Republic, and it became the top channel within a week or 2 weeks of starting up. So there is intense hatred of him. People hate that kind of conspicuous success. Number one. Number two is that he is pretty much swimming alone. The BJP is not helping him at all. The same Supreme Court that opens at midnight for every Naxal around is not taking suo moto cognizance of the abuse of the entire state machinery against one TV channel. And when the Editors Guild, I hope they all rot in hell, and I hope what's happening to Arnab happens to them with compound interest, is basically more interested in criticizing Arnab than they are in the treatment being meted out to him and all his journalists. Fourth, I think what Arnab has proven is that the journalist is the most redundant profession in this day and age,
mm,
because you don't need to have journalists to run a TV channel and achieve the top results.
mm,
Today, look at how successful this man is. He has displaced Aaj Tak.
mm,
And the Hindi market is something like what, 15, 20, 30 times bigger than the English market.
mm, mm.
And he has made Republic Bharat the number one channel in Hindi. Aaj Tak has fallen significantly behind. Now, you can say that Aaj Tak viewers were upset by their take on Sushant Singh Rajput, so it was only for 1 or 2 months that it fell. But it's
Yeah.
been almost a month now since the Sushant Singh controversy mellowed down somewhat.
Mm,
Aaj Tak's numbers haven't picked up again.
mm,
They're still way behind
mm,
Republic Bharat, right? So something has happened. There's a permanent shift that's happened.
mm,
The same way there was a permanent shift with when Republic English started. So this is natural. When you're the top of your game,
mm,
you're bound to have a lot of jealousy,
mm,
usually by the trash of society, by the scum, by the also ran, by the economically, it's that typical socialist mentality. मेरे
mm,
पास
mm,
पैसा नहीं है तो किसी और के पास पैसा नहीं होना चाहिए.
mm.
मेरे पास viewers नहीं है, किसी और को viewers नहीं मिलने चाहिए. And so they will keep hurling muck. It doesn't matter. Arnab is just going to go from strength to strength to strength. You are all pygmies compared to him. I would have called you a pygmy hippopotamus, but you're not even hippopotamus. तुम तो चींटी भी नहीं हो उसके आगे. उसके पैर के धूल नहीं हो उसके compete करने के लिए. So that, but again, the spinelessness of the BJP, the fecklessness of the BJP. Forget in protecting somebody who's deemed pro-BJP. Just in preventing the abuse of law of the entire state machinery in targeting an individual citizen and protecting press freedom. ऐसे छक्कों और नपुंसकों को मैंने जिंदगी में नहीं देखा है. Useless people, third rate, good for nothing. That's it.
Also, this, yeah, but Abhijit, this has happened to you also earlier when you were put in jail and for tweeting something, and it was not like just a few days; it was months, and then you were taken out only because you were not well, right? So this
No.
happened in Orissa. Yeah,
Remember, a lot of people helped me out with that.
yeah.
So I have no complaints in my case. For my own case, I don't have any complaints, even though it was two BJP leaders colluding to get me in jail. I don't have any particular complaints personally, because the others in BJP were extremely supportive, more than
Yeah.
made up those two chimpanzees. But Republic, who is Abhijit Iyer-Mitra? I am a little ant. Who is Republic? Republic is almost your flag bearer. It is almost
Yeah.
for the right wing in India. Because he smashes, I'm not talking about the BJP, I'm talking about the right wing.
Yeah.
Republic, in that sense, whether you like Arnab's journalism or not, is he's your brand ambassadors almost in that sense, right? What are you doing to protect the ecosystem, boss? उसके लिए तो कुछ करो. नहीं, कुछ नहीं. I mean, forget it even on the basis of partisanship. कम से कम अपना राजधर्म तो करो. You remember when the Godhra riots were happening, Vajpayee had told Modi, भाई अपना राजधर्म तो करो. गुजरात जल रहा है, राजधर्म तो करो. अब रिपब्लिक जल रहा है, क्या वाजपेयी तो is gone, but there's nobody left to tell Modi, भाई अपना राजधर्म तो करो. At least see to it that the institutions of the state aren't perverted and abused like this so blatantly. And if this is something that has to be said, it is shocking. It's shameful.
But why do you think BJP is not helping Arnab?
Tell me, what have they helped with? When do you remember when Karunanidhi threw when Jayalalitha had Karunanidhi arrested and thrown in jail. There was that very famous video where he's manhandled by the
Yeah,
police and
yeah,
dragged by his hair or dragged by his shawl or
yeah,
something like that.
yeah, yeah.
The governor at the time was a lady called Fatima Bibi.
Yeah.
And Fatima Bibi was asked to report immediately on this grave. And that time, Karunanidhi was an ally of the central government.
Yes.
And Fatima Bibi was asked to send a report to the center saying what the hell happened.
Yeah.
And of course, the governor doesn't have any independent sources of verification. She can only put into paper what the police tells her.
Yeah. Yeah.
Put it into paper and sent it up. And they're like, how the hell could you send us a version that was the same as the government's version? And she was kicked out the very same day. Her appointment as governor of Tamil Nadu was revoked the very same day, and she was kicked out of her job.
Yeah.
Now, you've had governors, you remember, like Ramesh Bhandari, who used to interfere. He dismissed a government overnight, to get that Mayawati, that is Mayawati's big grouse against Mulayam Yadav, that they came to kill her. It was all Ramesh Bhandari's doing, remember? So, their governor won't do a Ramesh Bhandari. Their governor won't even do a Fatima Bibi. Okay? You can use 56J, which is the summary sacking of individuals in any government employment, to sack people. You won't do that. You can put pressure on the Supreme Court to hear it out of turn as an emergency hearing. You're not doing that. I'd read about 7 days back that the Supreme Court had taken cognizance of what was being done to Arnab. Abhi tak ek sitting bhi nahi hua hai, ek hearing bhi nahi hua hai. This when they open up at 12 o'clock at night. Justice के घर जाओ, घर में आके 12 बजे रात को आपको सुनाई दी जाती है नक्सलों के लिए. And this is what I mean. They treat everybody as a, जैसे घोरी करता था ना, शिवलिंग को लेके दबा देता था on the steps of a mosque that he built, so that all the faithful would have to step on the Shivalinga to go in. That is what the BJP does to its supporters. It buries you on the step so that all the other faithful have to step on you to go inside the temple. And they have this delusion कि वो भगवान हैं बैठे जिनका दर्शन लेना पड़ता है. और ऐसे उल्लू के पट्टे भी हैं जो अभी भी मोदी 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 करके भजन ठंग ठंग करते रहते हैं. करो, भुगतो, मेरा क्या जाता है.
Moving to something else. Tell us about your. Do you like teaching? Could you tell us more about your own personal, self? Yes.
I'm happiest when I'm teaching, right? I love having very smart. So I used to teach in Australia at university. And, it was the experience of learning humanities there was so completely different, because the people in humanities out there were people who had joined because they loved the humanities. They loved political Islam, or they loved strategic studies or something like that. And they weren't like in India, जो dunce log, duffer log, मूर्ख लोग join करते हैं क्योंकि they didn't get admission into engineering or MBBS or something, and then they join humanities because they need to have a degree. Okay. So, it was like here, if you have a scoring range of between 25% to 85% in humanities, there even the starting, you would almost never have somebody who failed. It was always starting between like 65% going up to 85, 95%. So that was an incredible experience. And when you taught, you had to be totally prepared and on the ball. I learned more teaching than I did learning at university, because you go in there, they are like sharks. They're like great white sharks that have smelt blood and they're coming for you. You totally have to be on the ball. And there, the checks and balances, you can't be like a JNU professor. You hear some of the professional misconduct of JNU professors. You can never get away with shit like that in, this nut job, this leftist nut job, kya thi? Ghosh. Jayati Ghosh? Is that the economic nut job? Looks like a banshee. So that woman, everybody knew that if you're from SFI, she'll score you higher. It was the known thing. You had to have SFI membership for to score you higher, which is the communist student body.
Yeah.
You can never get away with that kind of crap. You did not need to get away with that kind of crap because the quality of discussions used to be so high. The kids would have read. And what we taught in class was macro contextualization and how to problem solve, because the reading material had already been done.
Yeah.
The pedagogy was extra, what is not in the books. So it was always problem solving. So see, that's a quality education. In India, we can't afford that. It has to be quantity. It has to be learned by rote, even at university. So I've always enjoyed that kind of teaching. And even now, in spite of all my other duties at IPCS, the one that because I do a lot of fundraising for IPCS and all of that, the one that I enjoy the most is teaching the interns and things like that. And the problem there is because, a lot of them come from are unfortunately, they're poisoned by a JNU or that typical idea of India style education. 90% of them are crap, but that 10% who are good, oh my god, they really make it worthwhile having to endure the remaining 90%. I've had an equal number of fantastic lefty students than I have had right-wing students. With the lefty students, what I've always tried to make them do is to look at the argument. Don't evade the argument, take the argument head on and see if you can tackle it. And I'm very proud that some of them actually took that lesson on. A lot of them took it as, sort of this sort of a chance to demonstrate their rhetorical skills. I'm not interested in your rhetoric. Rhetoric is a diplomatic skill, it isn't an academic skill.
Yeah.
If you're an academic that uses rhetoric, then you're a piece of shit.
Yeah.
How do you solve the argument? So it's always, I find it deeply, deeply rewarding.
Yeah. Going to another side, Abhijit, you've always said that openly you've spoken about being gay and about same-sex relationships. How has the scenario changed in India? Is there any do people accept it openly, or you do find some sort of negative?
You don't you don't find any of these in America or in Europe, because of that, the Abrahamic culture is to kill homosexuals. So there was this great fear of homosexuality, and in rural America, at least gun America, you'd get killed. Forget gun America, you could even get killed at the East Coast or West Coast. No? In India, you've never had that. It's always been, अरे दो लड़कों को पकड़ा गया, अरे बच्चे हैं, बच्चे यही करते हैं, करने दो बेटा. या आफ्टर शादी के बाद पकड़े गए तो यार ये देखो इतना पब्लिक में नहीं करना चाहिए, बहू है, बहू का सम्मान करो, जो साइड में करते हो वो चुपचाप करके साइड में करो. So, gay people in India didn't have to face that kind of religiously institutionalized homophobia, number one.
Yeah.
Invariably, what I've found is that, you have a lot of complainers in every community. There are some genuine cases of homophobia, but let me ask you this: if a boy and boy who are making out get beaten up, if a boy and girl had been making out in a village, do you think they would have not been beaten up? They'd still get beaten up.
Yeah.
So it's particularly targeting, and especially अगर तुम दूसरे कास्ट के होते, फिर तो कुछ और ही हो जाता तुम्हारा, depending on which region you are from.
Yeah.
How is it specifically homophobia per se? So India has never been a homophobic country. I remember Dadimas and Nanimas. I remember this from, like 35 years back, as early as I can remember. You don't understand it because in those days when I was 5, 6, 7 years old, I wouldn't even remember what the hell. I don't even know what I didn't even know what sex was, what sexual attraction was. Two boys were caught behind the bushes or things like that. Like, छोड़ दो, बच्चे हैं, बच्चे ऐसे ही करते हैं, ठीक है, क्या करें, उनका दिल है, करने दो. I've never seen somebody say, "Oh, I need to send you for psychiatric evaluation," blah, 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 blah. The worst thing that can happen to you, which happens very commonly, is, "Beta, shadi kar lo, khud ba khud bacche paida kar lo, it will get cured automatically." And my problem isn't with the parents who say it. My problem is the kids
Mm.
who then scream homophobia, who go along with it because they want baap ka jaidaad. They want their inheritance. They don't have the guts to say, "No, I'm going to lead my own life, but I'm not going to get married and destroy this woman's life."
Yeah.
So they want their cake and they want to eat it too. You want to inherit your father's property. You want to screw over a woman's life, destroy your children's life as well. And then you want to scream homophobia. Please give me a break.
Mm.
Only people that have been targeted horrifically for at least 50, 60, 70 years been the transgender community, the hijras.
Yeah.
Okay. Because at one point they used to be respected members of society, because India has always been very, very gender fluid.
Yeah.
Our descriptions of gender and sexuality have been extremely like Thailand. In that sense, sex is a natural thing. It's like you don't hide the fact that you eat food from your kids. No?
Yeah.
It's like, why you, which is what I went to jail for, to kind of show that sex was deemed compulsory education. Today they get so upset it is un-Hindu to do sex education in school. Why was there a notice board outside Konark or this thing saying no children under 13 allowed or no children under 15 allowed? Yeah, adult education. It was children's education. All the kids were taught what was happening. Okay. And they were taught multiple things saying it's fine. You can either be like this or you can be like this. Because imagine if you see something weird like a same-sex relationship, you'd ask Papa, ye kya hai? Ya Mummy, ye kya hai? And then Papa and Mummy will tell you, "Beta, ye bhi hota hai. Karna hai to kar." This whole there's a huge there's a culture of incentivizing victimhood because of this wokeness thing. So everybody now wants to become a woke bandwagon because it's a great tool for getting money. वो जो एक चूतिया था ना जिसको इससे निकाला था महिंद्रा से, he claimed he had gotten harassed at Mahindra or whatever. All his colleagues tell me he was a third-rate employee who never used to take the slack for anybody else. But on his little fake victimhood story, he is now a community icon. Okay? So, and apparently he's just as useless at his new job at Accenture. So, it's one of those things. There's this incentivization of victimhood. So you will have this manufactured atrocity literature.
Yeah.
Doesn't take away from the fact that there is sometimes, in rare cases, real atrocities happening every now and then. But most of it is directed against the transgender community.
Yeah. Abhijit, another question that I'd like to ask you is, with regards to social media, there was a couple, an elderly couple who were running a canteen, and one of the social media, decided to help them out, and started taking funds. But the funds were all diverted to this man's bank and not the couple. That's what the old man claims. So, so what do you see here? In some ways.
See, these are classic manufacturing scams. The kind of fundraising scams that happen. This isn't the only time this has happened. This keeps happening every single time. Why does it succeed more in India? Because we've got a terrible police force. It is the same reason rapes happen here. You don't deter rapes through death penalty. You deter rapes through every person knowing they're going to get caught. In which case, the police has to have an extremely high success rate. Your success rate in this country is abysmal. Your scapegoating rate may be very high, but everybody knows your actual success rate at catching the actual criminals is abysmal. Okay? So as long as that impunity exists, and the internet, because of its sort of anonymity, you feel that you can get away with more. But let's see. पर इसका कोई इलाज नहीं है अभी के लिए.
A question from Sparsh Singh. Will humanity achieve its ultimate goal when the whole world will become atheist in few 100 years, like most countries unite?
No chance, Baba. No chance. अभी atheist कितने हैं भाई दुनिया में? 1% maximum. 1% or 2%. How do you get it? Religion is a very powerful emotional tool that has been developed. Remember, when we were chimpanzees,
Yeah.
we had no religion. Australopithecines had no religion. Ramapithecus had no religion. Neanderthals maybe developed something like a religion. We don't know. It's a very controversial argument. The first and only species on earth to develop a religion has been hominids, well, specifically Homo sapiens, and developed it for sure about 30,000 years back. Proto religion, at least. Does that mean the gods didn't exist before that? Or did they, condemn every dinosaur? Did the dinosaurs meet their extinction because they didn't perform the Mahachandi Homam?
Yeah.
Chandi Ma got angry with them, and so she extincted them out of earth. ठीक है, या महाशिव पूजा, महारात्रि का शिव पूजा तुमने नहीं किया, उन दिनों में महाशिवरात्रि होता भी था, किसने डेजिग्नेट किया वो महाशिवरात्रि है? डायनासोर्स ने महाशिवरात्रि का पूजा नहीं किया, इसीलिए वो एक्सटिंक्ट हो गए क्या? तो इन दिनों में गॉड कौन थे भाई? You have no definable history of any kind of it is a placebo that's been developed by human beings, for better or worse. I still identify as a Hindu even though I'm an atheist. Now, how are you going to I don't feel the cause effect relationship of worship leading to, it leads to mental peace, yes, but it doesn't lead to a solution of the problem. Okay, for 98% of the population, it is not a solution that works. So they're going to continue that. You can't shove atheism down people's throats. And this is why, I'm very much a non-proselytizing atheist. This is the difference between a Hindu atheist and a Western Abrahamic atheist. For them, they've discovered this new religion called atheism. So they want to go to every school, every college, preach about it and shove it down your throat. For me, my atheism is meant for me. I don't try to convert anybody else. If somebody else wants to come and have a chat with it about me, I'm happy to talk to them about it. Every now and then I will tweet about it because I'm like, okay, this is a discovery of mine. I feel this way, which is my prerogative. It's my right. I'm not coming to you. I don't follow you. Na? I'm not coming and replying to you saying, Tumne bola Har Har Mahadev, and I'm coming and saying, prove to me that Mahadev existed till before 7500 BC. Nahin. I'm just putting it on my own timeline, and some people are coming following me on my timeline. और तुम बोल रहे हो कि मैं अपने timeline पे ये नहीं लगा सकता हूँ. So, you are not getting atheist in the next in human evolution. Now that religion has been introduced, you are not getting rid of it for the next 100,000 years at least.
Yeah.
Okay. नहीं होने वाला है. Next.
A question from Lalit Hispan. If we buy sufficient Rafales and choose to shift Tejas from GE414 to M88, will Safran manufacturer here for this sweetened deal?
Okay, please keep this question on the screen for the time being. First of all, no, can you keep that question on the screen, please?
I'll put it, yeah.
Let's spam the Rafale wala.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, first of all, if you buy sufficient Rafales, it is going to bankrupt you. Are you ready to get bankrupted? Okay. 126 was unaffordable, which is why they settled for 36. 126 and mind you, 126 is nowhere near enough to start indigenizing. Proper indigenization happens over almost about 400-500 aircraft. Okay, you are never going to be able to do that. Okay, it is economically ruinous. Second, an engine's mating with its plane is not a Lego piece. ये लेगो की तरह नहीं है कि तुम उसका जो टायर है निकाल दो और फिर नया स्टाइल का टायर बस क्लिप ऑन कर दो. A modern engine with a modern plane is so complicated. Engine intakes are still considered voodoo. The Russians still have not managed to design an offset engine intake. If you look at the F-18 or the F-16 or anything like that, you'll find that if this is the engine, this is the engine and this is the intake, the engine is always offset like this, so that uh, the air coming in and the radar waves coming in can't detect the engine here. Okay, so it's masked from the radar waves coming in here. The Russians have still not managed to do that. You look at a Russian air intake, you can see the look into the engine. They try to, twist it around a bit and things like that. It doesn't work. So, even designing an engine air intake is voodoo. It is literally voodoo. Okay. Uh, and computational fluid dynamics doesn't make it any easier, by the way. So, second is that every engine, the bolts, the pressures, and things are very, very different. And you need to redesign the whole aircraft. You have to redesign the whole center of gravity of the aircraft, the landing gear of the aircraft, because the landing gear is based on the center of gravity. The back wheels are exactly where the center of gravity is, where it touches down. Then you have to redesign, you have to rewrite the entire flight control software, the loads of weapons and things like that, where they can be balanced and so on and so forth, and all of that. This isn't easy, boss. Okay, and Safran and Rolls-Royce, I think, are the two companies that may be willing to give you that technology. The Americans are very clear they're not giving you crystal blade technology. And with the Safran, it is the most underpowered Western engine in the market at the moment. Okay? For an air force like you, that is, I think that is wrong. It should be power on demand, not the amount of thrust you can generate. But for an air force like us that is still fixated on super maneuverability and super cruise and thrust, the Safran isn't even the right engine for you.
Okay. Shaib Roy asks, what is your opinion about Delhi government replacing manufacturing industries with high-tech and service industries?
I haven't heard of this. Is it happening? Because I haven't even heard about this. High tech, देखो तुम्हारी औकात नहीं है high tech करने के लिए. Okay, you go to I don't know how many of you have been to North Carolina. Uh, but for those of you who have been to North Carolina, you will know that the high tech there is far superior to anything we have in India. In spite of that, when Boeing shifted its Dreamliner 787 production from Everett in Seattle, Washington State on the West Coast, northernmost West Coast, to North Carolina, and they want to shift the entire production to North Carolina, they are facing serious quality control issues producing, because North Carolina is a non-unionized state. You do not have unionized aviation workers out there. They are facing serious quality control issues in North Carolina. Okay. Now you want to start up high tech in Delhi. यार किस औकात से तुम high tech start करने वाले हो? These advertising, the amount of lack of anthropological knowledge, of economic anthropology that people have in this country, decision makers have in this country. हम क्या आत्मनिर्भर भारत, स्वाधीन भारत, क्या ऐसे सब कचरा फेंकते रहते हैं लोग. यार कहां से हाईटेक डेवलप करोगे तुम? No, what is your human resource footprint to be able to do that? You have none. If North Carolina has not been able to properly produce the 787, airlines are refusing to take delivery of 787 aircraft produced in North Carolina these days. If America is having that problem, okay, you have an issue. There have been a lot of German companies that shifted to China, and they were so not happy with the quality of production and things like that they had to shift back to they shifted to America or something like that. Okay, to this day the BMWs produced in Malaysia have a much higher fault rate than BMWs produced in South Africa or Germany or America. Okay, so there are all kinds of issues with that. Tum high tech, तुम्हारी औकात की बात नहीं है, but I've never heard about this thing that you're saying. So I think it's quite safe to see that कुछ होने वाला नहीं है. सुमन द्वारकानाथ पूछते हैं, why isn't the Indian government introducing offset for commercial aircraft purchased by Indian airliners just like for military purchases? They did. The Air India purchase had an offset clause, the big deal in which we bought 27 Dreamliners and 14, 15 777 300s and 200 LRs, it had a offset clause. And offset, by the way, is the wrong term to use. It is industrial participation. There was no real industrial participation. And instead of us paying them 100 rupees and getting back 50 rupees in investment that would have a gestation period of 5 to 10 years here, after which it whatever, instead we paid them 200 rupees and got back 100 rupees for a plane that was worth 100 rupees. इसमें घोटाला बहुत सारा हुआ था. So आप ना ऑफसेट को मैनेज करने के भी काबिल नहीं है आप. Today, Dassault isn't able to discharge its offset obligations for the Rafale because the quality of your industry is so low. They have trouble finding the correct person who will actually discharge the offset obligations in the right way. Thankfully, in the Dassault case, unlike the Boeing case, we did not pay them 200. We paid them 100 and we're getting something like 30, 40 rupees back in investment. In Boeing, we paid them 200 and got back 100 back. Okay. With ये Tatra truck scam हुआ था, याद है? There was a Tata truck scam in which I think it was not Vinchadda, but I think the same Nandas who got convicted for that BMW hit and run case, who owned the Claridges in Delhi, who was the Admiral Nanda, who won the great victory for us in the Bangladesh war, uska khandan hai. Same family. I think it was them. I'm not too sure. They were the ones who got caught up in the Tatra scam. And the Tatra scam was what? They were discharging, they were claiming 100% offset. When the auditors actually found them, they hadn't produced a single truck out here because all of these were fake orders. उन्हें 30-40 truck produce किया था, the remaining 1,000, 2,000, whatever trucks that were meant to be made were never made here. It was all fake invoicing. ठीक है? So तुम ना offset, तुम program management के लायक ही नहीं हो बॉस. IAS अकेडमी मेरे बाप तो डिप्टी डायरेक्टर थे अकेडमी के मसूरी में, और मेरी माँ रिटायर हुई सेक्रेटरी टू तमिलनाडु गवर्नमेंट से. अगर तुम IAS बंदरों को ही ये सब करने को बोलोगे ना, कुछ नहीं तुम्हारा होने वाला. ओके बंदर को एक गन, हिम्मत है तो बंदर को एक AK-47 दो भाई. उसके बाद क्या होता है तुम ही देख लो. दिस इज लाइक गिविंग IAS मैनेजिंग इंडस्ट्रियल प्रोजेक्ट्स, negotiating projects and things like that, is giving a bandar an AK-47. You don't know where it is going to go off, who it is going to hit. You'll be lucky if the monkey kills itself before it ends up killing you. Next.
Sparsh Singh says, sir, your views on ISRO Gangayaan space mission 2021.
उसके पहले एक आया था that flash that I wanted to take.
Yes.
One complaint Abhijit has from pro-Hindutva supporters or the Indian right wing for that matter: brainlessness, a lack of education. You don't read. Your entire focus is on if Rig Veda was written in 5000 BC or 7000 BC or 1000 BC. Your entire focus, instead of admiring a Boeing 787, is to say, was the 787 actually the Pushpaka Viman mentioned in the Ramayana? ना ही तो तुम लोग एंथ्रोपोलॉजी पढ़ते हो, ना ही तो तुम लोग सोशियोलॉजी पढ़ते हो, कुछ भी पढ़ते नहीं हो, पर आके फंडामेंटल्स जानते नहीं हो. ठीक है? You can't even write an article properly. When I go read an Op India article, I'm waiting to get to the substance. Okay, it takes me like 5-6 paragraphs before I even know. Sometimes not till the last paragraph do I even know where it's going. And what could have been said in 100 words to 1,200 words. You need to have academic rigor, boss. ऐसे नहीं चलता है. You need to be succinct in your writing. You need to be focused on the things that matter. You make your point crisply, clearly, and move on. But my real problem with the Hindu right wing is the extraordinarily low education levels. Certificate होगा पर education नहीं होगा. You may be a PhD, you may have a triple PhD, a quadruple PhD, you might even have a PhD in quantum mechanics or quantum physics or whatever you want to call it. But उल्लू के पट्टों का जायदाद जो है ना, तादाद जो है राइट विंग में, वो थोड़ा ज्यादा लगता है मेरे को. लेफ्ट विंग में चूतियों का ज्यादा मात्रा है, राइट विंग में उल्लू के पट्टों का ज्यादा मात्रा है. So what was the question? Sparsh Singh ka question. Gaganyaan,
Yeah.
Gaganyaan, very good project. Now, Gaganyaan, all of ISRO's projects. See, I have very, very few. If you notice, I never really criticize ISRO, even though I have a few problems with them. And the
Yeah.
problem is, they are not now allowing that technology to trickle down to the private sector and creating a whole ecosystem of micro, medium, and small companies. Because technology is like the root. It's like a tree. The tree is not strong because of the trunk of the tree that you see on the outside. It is strong because of all those fine roots that hold that tree in place. Okay, the finest roots are your micro sector.
Yeah.
The bigger roots are your small sector. उससे बड़े वाले medium sector होते हैं, and the biggest ones are the large sector. 70% of your innovation is being done in this small and micro sector because the replacement rate is very high and the technology leaps that are happening are the greatest in that particular sector. So my issue with ISRO has always been that they are not offloading all that work onto the micro, medium, and small sectors. But other than that, everything else they've been doing, because they're an accountable organization, they've got to show profits and things like that, is going very, very well. And there may be a few generations, not even generations, they're just a few years behind, say, Russia, America, and all those countries, Europe. But this is something we can totally accept. Unlike Tejas, which is so far behind Western fighters, or even the JF-17, the Pakistani Chinese JF, it's a Chinese fighter. Let's be clear about it. Chinese JF-17. Indian products aren't bad. They're at a different niche, they're at a different competition level, and they're doing extraordinarily well out there. And they're doing well because they engage with the rest of the world. Okay? They are quite happy to steal technology, to take technology, to buy technology. There's not this, dogmatic following of certain principles that don't work, that DRDO does, for example. So it's very good. But you've also noticed that they've got into trouble. They've started increasingly behaving like a government department. I don't know if it's an aberration, because they got into a deal with Devas, which they cancelled, and that has been in arbitration for almost 9 years now. 7 to 8 separate tribunals. The entire process of courts has been exhausted. The Supreme Court referred it to arbitration. It has been arbitrated 7 times over. All of them have found ISRO's commercial antics to be at fault. And they're using their government connections and babus to see to it that they don't pay out the 1.5 billion, not million, billion with a B, $1 billion that they owe to this private company called Devas. ऐसे नहीं चलेगा. This is criminal, this thing, and the government not doing anything about it. People don't understand this. The government thinks it is protecting its babus. The amount of business confidence you lose for every $1.5 billion that Devas has lost. You have lost about $150 billion in inwards investment because people just see ये देश, इसका political leadership, इसका bureaucratic leadership मेरे थूक के लायक नहीं है. अगर ये बेसिक रेगुलेटरी कितने बार ट्राइब्यूनल और एडमिशन आर्बिट्रेशन में जाना पड़ेगा मेरे को खुद अपना पैसा निकालने के लिए. So you can have all these logos. You can have an Elvis Presley lookalike clown also lead the lion logo.
Yeah.
But some joker of an Elvis Presley, he can come up with marketing slogans, but he can't install business confidence.
Yeah.
Okay. And you can rebrand it. Your failed project of Make in India, you can rebrand it as Atmanirbhar Bharat.
Yeah.
And have the same Elvis Presley clown play an impressive role in it. It's a joke, as is the clown in charge. So enjoy yourselves.
It's a question from Ankur Bhalti. I think we'll make it this the last question. Is that? Yeah.
Sorry, I've been enjoying this so much.
Now,
Damn.
9:30. Yeah.
Is the Indian Navy tragic?
Yeah.
Are Chinese? Okay. Can we just keep this question on the screen, because there's several questions here that I want to answer. Is the Indian Navy a tragedy? No, they're not a tragedy. They understand things better than the other two wings do, better than the Air Force and the Army do. The problem is they're still stuck on this thing ki har ek naya ship ka naya engine dalo, which means you can't create economies of scale and indigenously produce this one engine. Number one. Number two is this mix and match of Israeli Russian equipment, because the Russians will never allow you to integrate Russian equipment properly with Israeli weapons, and the Israelis will never properly allow you to integrate it. Everybody says there's this, lots of Navy commanders have sent me really nasty mails saying to, MCBC, Kutta Kamina, whatever, you blah, blah, blah. You don't know what you're talking about, la di da. My thing is very simple. In 2017, when Nirmala Sitaraman went on board a destroyer, there were two subsonic drones that came in, which your flagship anti-aircraft missile system from Israel missed. These weren't even high-speed drones. We're not talking about supersonic missiles. We're talking about propeller drones flying at 400 kilometers per hour. Two missiles were fired. Both of them missed the target. So I'm quite happy to admit that I don't know what I'm talking about. But if you are claiming that two Israeli missiles, latest Israeli missiles, mated to the latest Israeli radar system, flying at supersonic speeds, is missing a slow flying propeller driven, and propellers, because of the propeller, they have a huge radar signature. Jets, because of the hidden, we spoke about this, remember the alignment of the air intake to the engine, their radar signature is like hitting a small dot at a distance. With a propeller, it is hitting an elephant's bottoms from 1 meter away. If you miss an elephant's bottom from 1 meter away, then there's something very screwed up about you. Your two missiles failed to hit this. You look at the number of testing that happens where the equipment just fails to hit the damn target.
Yeah.
So I may not know anything, but I'm sorry, you don't know anything either. Because if you knew, then you would have a 100% hit rate. You don't get 100% hit rates. You usually get about 89 to 97% hit rates. वो भी तुम्हारी नहीं है. You've got a 100% failure rate, boss. तो किसकी बात कर रहे हो? So in that sense, this is number one. Number two is we don't have the amount of money that China has. So just because China is building 3-4 aircraft carriers, you do not have the luxury of also building 3-4 aircraft carriers. Okay. What you do, they are doing a sea control strategy. What you need is a sea denial strategy. You can't control it, but you can deny it and make it impossible for them to come in, which is entirely a submarine-based strategy, but they're not going in for it because two things the Navy does not seem to get is, one is systems integration or the political dimensions of systems integration. They probably get the electronics of it, but not the political dimensions, that the Israelis will never give you the source codes for something you want to integrate with Russian equipment and vice versa. And the second aspect of it is they clearly don't know economics. Okay? Which is why you are making the same mistake the USSR did with USA, going on building aircraft carrier after aircraft carrier. You're going to bankrupt it and you are not going to get the value out of it. Okay? So that is the tragedy part of the Indian Navy. Are Chinese fifth generation fighters genuine or just aesthetic? Chinese fifth generation fighters are absolute shit. Okay, they are purely aesthetic. Just because you shape something. You look at Iran. Every 2 years, Iran comes up with a new design for a stealth fighter. It's a joke. It's a plastic model of some sort. It can't even take off. Chinese fighters can at least take off, but they are very fake in that. ये क्या बज रहा है? Okay, they're fake in that sense. They don't have the complete electronic signature management that's required. Stealth is not just shape. It is how you mask your electronics. It is how you mask all the reflecting surfaces and things like that. It is how you transmit electronics. Are your electronics fast enough to just detect something and come back without the other person being able to detect it? And in a Western fighter, probably more important than the radar is the radar warning receiver. Okay, it is this warning mechanism that tells you that you have been hit by a very faint wave, and it can actually directionally target where it comes from. It can detect a aircraft scanning you or a ground radar scanning you from almost twice the distance that the radar itself can, sometimes 3-4 times. It is actually far more secret technology than the radar is. Okay, So all of these things, the Chinese don't get it. Their engines are rubbish. They had 3 different engine factories. They shut them down and they consolidated to one. Even to this day, they are not able to produce a proper engine because they understand they've stolen a lot of technology. They understand the how to do it. Even that they don't understand completely because they didn't steal all the blueprints. They don't understand the why. And the why is the more important question to ask than the how. Same thing I was telling you about teaching. Teaching how to books mein likha hota hai. Why is why you need the professor to teach you. And that is what never happens at JNU because all the teacher tells you is why, how. They never tell you the why of it. Because if being hardcore communist like the Jayati woman is, उसके पूरे ideology का 70 साल का ideology के उसके मुंह पे अंडे लगेगा. So that is why she will never teach you the why. The others won't teach you the why because they're too buddhus to understand that. Next part of the question: does India need a better coordinated air defense system or better fighters? You need both, but for that, please understand you are asking me all hardware related questions. Why is the Indian Navy a tragedy? Why are we so alarmed by Chinese fighters? Why are our air defense systems and fighters not coordinated? Why do we have so many different logistics chains? Why do we need to procure not six, maybe 2 or 3 of the same kind of weapons from 2 different sources? Because one plane can't use the weapons of the other. It is a human problem. There is a serious human problem in your military that they don't understand economics, they don't understand logistics. There are very, very serious problems. Okay. It is a human problem. So focus more on the human and less on the equipment. Is she too dangerous? No, she is an idiot. Though idiots can also be very dangerous because remember, a dog should know who to take on. A dachshund going and attacking a Rottweiler, the Rottweiler isn't that worried, but the dachshund should be very worried. The problem is we've got 2 not very bright leaders. हमारा भी ज्यादा ये ट्यूबलाइट थोड़ा है, उनका तो महाबुद्धू है. When you've got 2 people facing each other off, that is the most dangerous situation. Next,
One last question. Yeah, Smita Rana.
How Indian politics? If Trump wins, it won't really affect politics. If Biden wins, I'm very, very scared of what happens with our equation with China, number one. Now, a lot of people make the point that, these are institutional democracies. Policies don't just change. I'll give you the example of Kevin Rudd. Australia is meant to be a mature institutional democracy, but when that Chinese stooge took over, he stopped the supply of uranium to India that John Howard had committed to. He also withdrew the Australian Navy from the Quad. So the amount of damage and, Nixon, another example, Nixon's own personal hatred for Indira drove his entire policy during the 1971. It had very little to do based on American interests and more to do with Nixon's own personal dislike of India. Okay. So with Biden, with a Chinese stooge like Biden and a complete nutjob banshee like Kamala Harris, we call her Dumbala Harris, the chances of you getting screwed are very, very high. And you're going to see a worsening of this woke disease. The movies got it wrong. We shouldn't have been worried about the zombies. I think being in a zombie film is less scary than being in a woke film. It's featuring Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, and clowns like that.
Thank you so much, Abhijit. It's been such a nice talking to you and sharing your immense knowledge. We'll call you again because there's a lot more that you could share with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Good night. Good night.